Welcome everybody to today's Lunch and Learn. We'll get started in just a moment. We're gonna let a few more people in and then we'll get rolling. All right, well, thanks everybody for joining us today. My name is Julie Riley. I'm the director of LASARD, the Louisiana Autism Spectrum and Related Disabilities Project. We're here in New Orleans, Louisiana, and we serve the state. We support schools by providing training and coaching related to educating students with disabilities. I know autism isn't our name, but it's very broad, much broader than that with the students that we serve and the teachers and the educators that we work with. And we're also part of the LSU HSC Human Development Center, which is the state's UCED or University Center for Excellence on Developmental Disabilities. So we're one project within the UCED or within HDC. There's an early childhood program, there's a transition program, there's other programs within HDC, and we're the K-12, part of the K-12 initiatives piece here at LASARD. And this is our team. We have 12 facilitators that are based all across the state. I know some of you are on. Thanks for joining my facilitators. And I know a lot of you probably know some of these faces from being in your schools and in your communities.
Thank you.
So to get started, in this Lunch and Learn, we have 30 minutes and there's a lot of information. So I'm going to go quick. I'm going to give you just a highlight. And then I'm going to share some resources with you where you can go for more information because we don't have time to get in depth into a lot of these. But however, I will say this as a pitch here. If you do want a training like this, but that goes into more detail, we are available for contracts for next school year. And this is one of the trainings that we could do at your school with your teachers or within your school district. So just keep that in mind. As we go through, if this is something that you might be interested in for your school or district. So today we're talking about social interaction skills. We'll start with what to teach, how to pick what skills that you want to teach to, again, a student with autism spectrum disorder or a related disability, just anyone that has a hard time with social interaction. And then we're going to talk about specific evidence-based strategies that you can implement to teach social skills. And then we're going to talk about measuring progress too. And if you have any questions throughout this, please pop them into the chat. We'll have time at the end for a Q&A if you want to stick around and ask specific questions. But if you have questions as we go, put them in the chat and I'll try to make sure to address them as we go, or one of my fellow facilitators might also answer them if they have the answers. So why do we care about social interaction skills? Well, this is something, and I got this from CESA, the Center for Secondary Education for Students with Autism, years ago. And it's really, it stuck with me after a presentation I saw with them. But we want all students, not just students with disabilities, to leave school so they can have a pretty good life. I mean, what's the point of going to school? When they get out, we want them to have somewhere to go, someone to love, and something to do. And these are, it's just what you would hope for anyone. And the thing that's keeping a lot of kids from having this outcome when they get out of school is social interaction skills. A lot of times it's not addressed at school, and kids leave school with lots of academic skills, but sometimes they leave without the social interaction skills that they need to self-advocate, that they need to talk to someone to get a job, that they need to make friends when they go someplace, so it's just really important that we include social interaction skills when we're working with kids in schools. And this is some research. Last year I did a presentation at the National Down Syndrome Conference, and I did some research around Down syndrome and social skills. And this was one of the things that came up. This was a survey from adolescents with Down syndrome. And I just thought this was really interesting about what did they think was important for a good life. And I thought this was really relevant to what we're talking about today. But participation in activities throughout their life. They want friendships, they want good family relationships, and they want independence. So I just think that's important to keep in mind too. Like, what do the kids want? What do they want when they get out of school? And what are the barriers to this participation and independence that the kids want? And a lot of times the first thing is they're not with other kids, and that's the big inclusion piece, which is a whole nother multiple days of trainings that we can get into. But the first thing they need to do is be with other kids, right? They need to have opportunities to meet other kids with similar interests, to practice these social skills that we're going to be teaching them. So that's really one of the main barriers. And also sometimes adults can get in the way, very well-meaning adults who might be jumping in to be a kid's friend when they really need to make friends with other students their same age, other kids the same age. So that's just really important to make sure that you're not being a barrier. For example, I've been in classrooms where it's a turn and talk, and then they turn and talk to the adult in the room, because that's the expectation, but help them have the skills to turn and talk to another student, right? So that's how we can promote these social interaction skills and not be a barrier. Make sure they're there and make sure we're not being a barrier. And then when we're thinking about what social skills to teach, here are some things to keep in mind. If I teach this social skill, will it result in better peer relationships? And one of the other things I see sometimes is social skills on IEPs, or just when I ask what social skills are you working on, sometimes they're very compliance oriented, like, well, they stay in their seat, stay quiet when the teacher's talking. And those aren't things that are going to help them with peer relationships. We really need to target social interaction skills. How can they interact and make friends and interact with other peers? And if I teach this skill, will it result in a better quality of life for the student and his or her family and social world? So thinking beyond school as well. I know we probably have some parents on. Oh, I forgot to do the poll. Well, that's okay. I had a poll to see who I was on, but that's okay. If we do the social skill, is this something that's important for the student outside of school, for their family, so they can participate more in activities that the family's doing and that's important to the family and their social world as well? Do they want to be involved in sports? Do they want to be involved in clubs? What is that student's social world? And looking to the future as well. What skills do we need to teach so the student can participate more in the future in all these activities? And then finally, will this skill be a building block for more advanced social skills in the future? So sometimes there are skills that build on each other. For example, a student needs to be responsive to the social initiations of others first before they can have sustained interactions or sustained conversations. So just thinking if we want to really build up to having conversations, we first need to teach the individual to respond when somebody comes up to them to talk, right? That's the first step. So just keep these things in mind when you're choosing social skills. And again, make sure they're interaction skills. And then finally, we are hearing in the disability community more and more from the lived experiences of those with disabilities. And I really think that's important to keep that in mind too, when we're looking to work on social skills. So we really need to consider the individual and what's important to them, maybe through person-centered planning, which again is a whole nother day of training, but really looking at talking with that individual, what are your goals, right? Even starting at a young age by offering choices, lots of choices. Who do you want to sit by? What do you want to play on the playground, right? So once we know what this individual wants to do, then we can help them interact in that setting. And we don't want to put anyone in a situation that makes them feel unsafe or that they have to act. And that's one of the things that's coming out around individuals with neurodiverse individuals, people with autism and other related disabilities, is that sometimes they feel like they almost have to act a certain way when they can't be themselves. And we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that we're just giving them the skills so then they can have a more fulfilled life. And also it's also about other people that are interacting with that individual to understand them. And the individual with a disability just may have a different way of interacting. And we don't, that's okay. For example, if an individual has a repetitive behavior, maybe it's hand flapping or something that keeps them regulated, that's okay. I mean, whose issue is that? It's ours, right? Might make us feel uncomfortable, but it's not one that we want to target and make them stop doing, because it's something that helps them regulate. Same with eye contact. And that's something that, social skills used to always include make eye contact. And that's something that most programs don't include anymore, because we know that for many individuals, especially with autism, that's something that's really hard for them and it's not necessary. So just when you're thinking about what skills to target, really think about what's important to the individual and don't put them in situations that might make them feel uncomfortable. Really use their wants and needs as a guide. So here are some examples of some things you could teach. And this is from a list I found years ago from an article by Vernon et al. But just asking relevant on-topic questions, making relevant comments, limiting oversharing, and so on. So, and these again are across age ranges. So these are some things you could start from a very young age in pre-K and go to high school with these skills. But we want to make sure that individuals do have these skills to really interact with others. You know, there could be, of course, there are many other skills you can teach. You know, I'm thinking, I was looking at different websites and research, and there's a lot around, you know, teaching social skills of electronic communication, right? How to use your iPhone, how to text, you know, those are all very specific things that we need to look at, especially as students get older. And then on the younger end, you know, play, interacting, you know, staying in the same space and having a back and forth, sharing, you know. So again, these are interaction skills, but they can really vary based on the age of the individual and also what skills they already have and what's of interest to them. So the first step, once we figure out what our goal is, what we want to teach, is we want to look at the baseline data. So what that means is what are they currently doing? Are they doing this skill at all? So sometimes this can be direct observations, and I know this I'm a behavior analyst, so I'm always going to talk about data, but it's really important for us to know how often is this person doing this currently? And is this something they're even doing? Is this something the person knows how to do and they're just not doing it? Or do we really need to teach the skill? Like, this is how to do it. So if the individual isn't doing the skill at all, then we know it's a skill deficit. So we really need to work on teaching the skill directly. But if something this individual does sometimes, then we really just want to work on them practicing that skill and being more comfortable with it. So it makes us approach it differently. If there's something that the individual can do sometimes, that we just need to make sure we're giving them more opportunities to practice it, maybe some reinforcing of that skill over time. But if it's something the individual doesn't do at all, then we might need to directly teach it. So once we watch, so this is a generic example, but interaction with peers. So this individual, we watched them over 5 days and we saw them have one interaction with a peer. So we know it's in their repertoire, right? We know it's something they can do, but maybe they're just not interested. We might need to find some different peers. We might need to set up different situations. And so based on this data, we can determine a goal. So our goal, we're not going to say 10 interactions with peers because they're doing it maybe once, you know, so our goal here might be 4, you know, for the next 9 weeks. You know, whatever your timeline is, just pick a goal of something for us to reach so we know what we're working for, what would be a realistic expectation for this individual for that specific goal that we're working, for that skill that we're working on. And here are some selected evidence-based strategies. Again, this is not a full list. Again, we only have 30 minutes here today, but these are some that are used frequently across settings in schools and homes and clinic settings. And these are also ones that are supported by research. These are evidence-based. And if you're not familiar with the AFFIRM modules, especially if you're working specifically with students with autism spectrum disorder, that is a great resource for, they've done the lit review, and so they know what is evidence-based, and they have great training materials that are free on their website. I asked Allie as we go through this to share some, there it is, to share some links with you. So that is the link for the AFFIRM modules if you're interested. Again, they're free. You just have to register for an account, but you can go through the trainings and get resource materials around these and other evidence-based practices as well. So these are the ones we're going to talk about today: direct social skills training, visual support, social narrative, scripting, and peer-mediated intervention. So first, we're going to talk about direct social skills training. And again, this is when we are working with a student who does not have the skill, when we need to directly teach them the skill. So direct instruction, this is direct instruction of very specific skills. This can be conducted one-on-one with a student, or it could be a small group of students who have similar needs that we're going to work on teaching the specific skill. And each lesson follows a similar format. There's some sort of check-in at the beginning. They teach a new skill. It's broken down as task analyzed, the specific steps. There's some modeling of the skill. They practice within this group or within this interaction. There's some feedback, and then we talk about generalization. When are you going to practice the skill when you leave the group? So there are some packages that you can use, social skill curriculum, that do this already. And here's some. The Peers curriculum has a ton of research behind it. It's this is a book that they have, but if you go to their website, and Allie's going to put it in a minute for all of these, they have a lot of resources from pre-K all the way to adulthood. And I had this book somewhere. I must have loaned it out because I was going to show it, because they really break it down very specifically. But it's very similar to what's on the next picture here, the Boys Town curriculum. it breaks it down like that, like very specifically as a lesson plan of what you need to do to teach this specific skill. So again, Boys Town is another option for breaking down skills. They have a lot of, I got this one for free on their website, but I think they do have some paid curriculum as well. And then skill streaming is another curriculum. Again, there are lots of other ones. These are just the ones that I'm most familiar with. And skill streaming, I have the cards. So they comes with cards when you're working in a group, and each student would get a card. So this is for elementary school, and it's asking for help. So you can see it breaks down the skill, the very specific steps. I don't know if y'all can see it. Can I do it alone? If not, raise your hand. 3, wait, say to yourself, I know I can wait without talking. 4, ask for help in a friendly way. So again, very basic, but again, this is for elementary. And if you're working with pre-K, you can also do this and break it down with visuals, right? What does it look like, and show them pictures of other students doing it. So it's the same way, but it might be using more visuals and not written words. Same way if a student can't read, you can use the visuals as well. So these are direct social skills training curriculum that you can use, or you can adapt it to meet your own needs, or you can do a hybrid version, right? It's not the specific curriculum that's important. What's important is that you're following these steps here. And you would also, all these strategies are often used hand in hand. Like when you're teaching this, you're probably going to be using some visual supports. You might be using some peer interaction training as well. So, again, this isn't just in a silo. You're going to do some social skills training one-on-one, and then the child's going to have this skill and use it all the time. We really need to make sure it's generalized and being used in natural settings. And we might need some other supports to get that done. The next thing we're going to talk about is visual supports. And again, this can be used with the direct social skills training package if that's something you're interested in. And here's some examples of visual supports to support social interaction. And this is one that breaks down the steps, right? So that's what it is, really the specific steps broken down. And this is one around getting too close to someone, getting in someone's body space, personal space. And you can use visuals to show them when they're in the right space or not. And this is another interesting one for sometimes kids, especially kids with autism, are bluntly honest about things, but there's sometimes some thoughts should just stay in your head, right? And you shouldn't say them. So this is a very direct visual way to teach that specific skill. And this is one we used a lot, especially in pre-K and younger kids setting where they're doing a lot of play in class, maybe some center time where we're taking turns. And again, this could be speaking or just taking turns with a game. And we've used this with just a bead on a pipe cleaner where you can move it back and forth. And then this is one kind word scale. And this is using the 5-point scale, which we're not getting into today, but it's another great resource for helping individuals self-regulate their emotions. But it's also a way just to kind of rank things visually, like 5, these are not words we want to use. 5 is red, right? 5 is, we don't want to go there. 1, these are things we want to do all the time. And then it's ranked in the middle somewhere. So you can see here, this is an activity where they go through, they talk about some words and or phrases, and they put them on the scale. And we've used this for especially young adolescents or young adults for different things. We've done it for how to know, like if someone is interested in you for dating, or what to do if you want to date someone, if you're interested, it's okay to say hi. It's not okay to sit outside their house, right? So these are just some of the things, the way that we can put it in this visual format for them to understand specifically what's okay and what's not okay in different situations. All right, social narratives, which kind of are a visual support as well. So a social narrative is kind of, you might have heard social stories before. Social stories is the trademark term from Carol Gray. But the goal of social narratives is not to change the individual's behavior. It's really to help them understand the events and expectations around a certain situation. Because a lot of people say they use social stories, but it's really just like, don't do this, do this, do this, do this. But really, we want social stories to explain the situation to an individual. And there's different kind of sentences that you should make sure are included in social narratives. So the directive sentences, this is telling the individual specifically what to do. Those should be the least amount of sentences should be the directive. Most of them should be perspective, understanding the perspective of other people. So here's an example around personal space. When I talk to people, I need to give them space and stay away from their faces. That's a directive. That's what you need to do. When people come too close, it makes other people uncomfortable. So that's giving them that perspective of someone else. Everybody needs space. That's just an affirmative statement. When I make people uncomfortable, they want to get away from me, perspective. They might not want to talk to me again, perspective. When I give people enough space, I get to play with and talk to people. I make friends and have fun. So this is an example of using the different kind of sentences. Again, if you Google social stories, you get a ton. So if there's something you're interested in, this is one, again, that can be used for a student that can read, but you can always add lots of visuals. Here's one I found online for playing hide and seek. And it was just a nice way of walking through the steps of explaining the game, right? Which is something, you know, there's not direct instruction on how to play hide and seek, but for some kids without those really innate social interaction skills, they might not understand. So this walk through specifically what they need to do to play hide and seek. And this is from the And Next Comes L website, which is just a website that has different resources. It's not like a proprietary website or anything, but they have lots of different social stories there. And the other one that Allie put in the chat, oh yeah, there it is, the Watson Institute. They have a lot of really good social stories as well. Just their website said they're for personal use only, so I don't want to share it on a public format. But the Watson Institute has a lot of good social stories for a broad range of ages. So again, depending on the age of a student, you can use more pictures or more words. So really, same principles for different ages still apply. All right, scripting is one of the other things we're going to talk about. And this just gives a student some things to say, right? So if you're working with a student who really just doesn't know what to say in certain social situations, this gives them some ideas. So again, what we talked about earlier is make sure you're not teaching the kids like this is exactly what you say in a social situation. You're giving them some ideas, right? Giving them some options to practice. And then this is a card they could have with them in the cafeteria, or you know, you could just practice, look at it before they go into the cafeteria. What are some things that you might say to your friends at lunch today? So when you're thinking about scripts, again, what's the best format? Written, picture cues, you know, whatever it is, what works for that student. We want to make sure we train the communication partner. So who is this individual talking to? We want to make sure they have a good response, right? If a child is trying to interact, we want to make sure that those kids that they're sitting by at lunch are going to respond to them. So we might need to role play and model how to use the script. And then we want to fade it over time. Again, we don't want it to become something that the child like, oh, I need to look at the script before I go to the cafeteria every day, right? We have to generalize it that then they can use these skills independently. And here's an example. This is from CAMP's research about a specific toy or game. And I think this is really interesting, especially for those of you who are parents or who work in home settings. You know, what are the kids playing? And then listen, when kids who are very socially astute are playing this game, what are they saying, right? And take notes. What are the things, you know, you don't want to sound like, you know, an old lady when you're playing a game. So don't just go from what you're thinking, go from what you're hearing other kids say, right? You know, they don't say, excuse me, it is your turn. You know, they say like your turn, you know, so just make sure that you're using phrases and things that other kids are actually saying. All right, peer mediated interventions. This is the last intervention I'm going to talk about, but this is a very important one. And it gets at the point that we talked about earlier. You probably want to include this with all interventions, that you're training the communication partners, the other people that are working with the student that you're working on specifically on social skills. So they're responding and they understand this individual. So there are lots of different models of PMI or peer mediated intervention, but they all have very similar steps. So we're going to talk about the steps here and give you a couple more resources. So regardless of the model, these are the similar steps. So there's always some sort of planning that needs to go into this. And then the training of the peers. We need to work with the peers a little bit before we start to make sure they understand their role in this. What are they going to do? Are they just going to listen? Are they going to ask certain questions? You know, just to get an idea. And there's lots of more information about this, like how to choose the peers with the right settings. Again, there's a lot more information around this that you can get from the Affirm site or from some other resources as well. And then we're going to implement it after we train the peers, and we're just going to keep monitoring the progress. Again, we want to make sure that this is working, and we want to keep an eye on the student, that they're not uncomfortable, that we're not putting them in a situation that they're uncomfortable, that's not good for them. We really want to make sure they're making progress with social skills and they're happy doing it. And then we also want to support the peers. If they have any questions, we want to check in with them regularly to make sure they're still good, they're happy, they're going through this training to interact with a student with autism or related disability. And here's just examples for different age groups. This is Stay, Play, Talk. which is a program specifically for pre-Ks around training pre-K students to do just that, to stay, play, and talk. And this goes through the planning, who's on your team, who do we need to get together. And in this situation, we were working for a student, working to help her just interact and play, right? She did not really interact with other students at all in center time. So we found 2 or 3 students that seemed interested and that she was interested in, like one she would always play near. And then this is what you teach the other kids, to stay, play, and talk, even if the student doesn't talk back to them, because sometimes they might try and then they get discouraged because she's not talking back to them and go to another area. But we really want to teach them, like, yes, stay, play, and talk, stay in the area. And then Allie dropped a link in the chat box that's around stay, play, talk very specifically. And then this is another thing you can use with peer mediated intervention in elementary school. So during snack time, that's a great time that kids interact, right? So we might need a visual support to just get them started, right? So here, what are some things that you can do to give them some ideas to talk about during snack? And again, this can be used, you can adapt this for many different ages. So this is a pre-K or elementary. So today we're going to talk about the zoo. So, help them come up with some ideas, maybe start the conversation, then fade out, because you want them to really have that back and forth there. And then this is an example in a middle school classroom. And these are for the student with disabilities, just some notes for her around just different activities to fully participate in the general ed classroom. But the special ed teacher and the paras were checking in regularly to make sure that people were responding appropriately, the trained peers to the student. All right, and then lastly, we want to keep monitoring progress, right? We want to make sure we're reaching our goal. So again, here's my completely made up data that looks great, but this is what you might want to see, right? So our baseline is here. We had the one time that the student interacted with peers. But then after we implemented peer supports, look at this. Did they meet our goal of 4? Yes, we met our goal of 4. So we want to keep going though, right? Because we don't have it consistently across multiple days. So we know that this intervention is working, is headed in the direction we want to go. But if we looked at our data and the child was still in 0s and 1s, this is not a great intervention. We need to go back to the drawing board. All right, we're using peer supports, but maybe we need to do some direct social skills training as well with this student, or maybe we need to add in some prompting and reinforcement, So this helps you just make an informed decision about where to go next. Keep going with this or do something else. So in summary, we discussed what to teach around social interaction skills. We talked about specific evidence-based strategies, and we talked about measuring success. So I hope this was useful. Again, I know this was a very quick overview, but in summary too, just keep these things in mind. We want to build a pretty good life for the kids when they get out of school, for them to have somewhere to go, someone to love, and something to do. We want to remove the barriers so they can interact with their peers in these activities. So make sure they have the skills and they have the opportunities, and that we're not standing in their way, so they can independently just interact and have friends and have a great future when they get out of school. All right, so just a few notes before we dismiss. We are now working with schools and districts to determine services for next school year. So if that's something you're interested in, please reach out. I have my contact information on the last slide here. And we also, on our website, we have some online resources that anyone can access. Let me move this barrier up a little bit, and it's on the top there. And then our next Lunch and Learn will be April 21st, and it's around sensory support. So I know that's a hot topic for many individuals. So do log in for that one on April 21st. And then before you go, please take a quick survey. You can point your phone at this and then follow the link and answer just a few questions about this Lunch and Learn. We want to know if it was useful for you and if you have any tips for next time. Again, Lunch and Learns are designed to be short, just to give you a little bit of information and some resources. So I hope this worked out for you. And if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat box, or I'll wait around for a few minutes afterwards if anyone has anything they want to ask. So thank you, everyone. I'll stay on this slide for a minute. My contact information is at the end, so I'll wait until everyone has a chance to look at the to take a picture with their phones. And yeah, feel free to unmute and ask any questions if you have any, or type it into the chat box. Otherwise, thanks for joining us. Will this training be on our website? Allie, Melinda, I forget the protocol here.
It will, eventually end up on our Facebook page and on the website. Probably
And newsletter for
in the
March.
newsletter. Yeah.
So yes. Are there any other questions along the way? Thanks, Allie, for dropping all those links in. All right, I'm going to go to the next slide with my email here. So if anyone has any specific questions or if they want to talk to me about services for next school year, please reach out. And this has our website, our Facebook, and our Instagram. We are not sharing copies of the PowerPoint, but we will have the recording. Sure, thanks for joining us. Thank you. Hope everybody has a great weekend, a great Friday afternoon. Thank you.